guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be a very quick book review, and this is what I'm calling my first 5-star read of 2024. I say that with a bit of a it is, but let me explain. Because I am so I very, very rarely give 5-star reviews. So this is a 5-star review for this particular kind of book that I read at a particular time where it just worked. It worked for me and I just loved it. But I have to say it is silly. It's like it's urban fantasy. So if you're not into that, it probably is not going to be a 5-star read. But for me, the humor, the characters, I was dying laughing at points. It was like the palate cleanser I needed after so many books that just weren't landing for me. So let's get into it. This is going to be the first book of the Magic on Main Street series, but this is part of an overall series called Magiford Supernatural City. This is by Shea, and this is The Lies of Vampires and Slayers. Put it there. So if you don't know about this series, I'll explain briefly. There is a whole series that starts off with Hazel and Killian are the main characters, and this is like the vampires. And then you have the next ones, which are the Fae, then there's the werewolves, and then there's another one that is another race, which I can't say because the whole thing is a spoiler. However, it's all going through like these different supernaturals, and then there's usually a couple. Obviously, it's like a urban fantasy romance, and it's establishing just more and more of this, world building and this city in Magiford where, they have these supernaturals living amongst humans, and then how they're interacting and what's going on, and then building out from there. So this one, Magic on Main Street, has Jade, who is a vampire slayer, and she's working on a supernatural task force to basically they're like the police of the supernatural world. And this is all relatively new because supernaturals are, very separate. They kind of keep to themselves, like their own little groups, up until lately when magic has been slowly dying out and they need to kind of join together to fight against that. So that's kind of like the overarching plot point. Is like what's going on with magic, why is there less magic, this is why the elves are no longer around, and magic has just been slowly dying, and now they need to figure out, what are they going to do and how do they move forward as like humans are kind of taking over and the supernaturals are weakening in their power. Okay, so I love Jade. She's great, but the standout character is going to be the vampire, whose name I'll put here, but I was saying Considine, so let me know if you have a different pronunciation, but I love him. This is a long-established characteristic of vampires in Magiford, that the longer that you live, the more tired, apathetic, just depressed you become, and you're kind of sleeping more and more until eventually you just fall into a very deep sleep. So that's kind of what's happening with vampires as they age. All these vampires are just kind of giving up. Okay, so Considine is a very old vampire, and he's in charge of basically this family, and they're not his offspring. He didn't create these vampires, but his best friend died and left him in charge of his family and all all the vampires he had turned. And so Considine is, out of loyalty and love for this friend, he's taking care of his children and he's very displeased. So in order to fight against this apathy and this desire that they have as they age to just kind of withdraw and sleep more and more and, not really be in the world, he is just causing problems, and I love him for that. He is the cat character that I appreciate so much. He's, knocking things over, causing issues, making things happen just to be like, wake up, what are you doing? And in the first scene when we meet him, he is literally watching a mansion burn down. Yes, he set the fire, and it's all just to get this vampire to rouse from this depression, and he's just moping. And so it's like, hey, I gotta go over and wake up this guy. He's falling into this depression, and he's not gonna be around if he just continues to get further and further in this apathy. So his whole job is just to cause these vampires problems and issues to basically make them annoyed enough to keep living. And I love him for that. He's great. He's one of my new favorite characters. I love his bad attitude. I love his grumpiness. He's perfect. And Jade is obviously, she's working on this task force. She's a very cheery but withdrawn character because she wants to be very optimistic, but she also has extremely bad social anxiety, which I can appreciate because I also have, and not as much now, but when I was younger, extremely bad social anxiety to the point of like being sick. So I appreciate this in a character that I can relate to, and I feel like it was written really well. She's trying to make it in this new city. She was originally part of a vampire slayer family, and they work together, and that's like the family is so important, and they're all like slayers. But they are the assassins of the supernatural world. And she felt like with the way that, things were moving forward, she didn't want to be seen as a assassin. She wanted to be working with other supernaturals to like better, Magic Forward and the world around him. So she is trying to make it in this new city. She's away from her vampire slayer family, and she's just trying to make friends, and she can't. She's very awkward. And she's got her whole task force that she doesn't really seem to realize are quite afraid of her. She thinks she's always coming off as like rude or being, that they're thinking that she's stuck up. And it comes off more that they just don't really understand that, her whole demeanor. She's actually quite competent at her job. She does really well, and she's like very well trained. So they see that and they think like of her as being more of a higher up. And so they don't treat her as like one of their friends. And it's really hard for her because she's feeling all the time that she really wants to be just, accepted. And it's just not happening. And then she's at her apartment complex where she's trying to make friends, and it's just not happening. As someone who's moved multiple times and had to try to like make it in new cities and meet people, I can relate. So that's kind of the setup for this story. And of course, Considine and Jade are going to meet, and there is no romance in this first book. So this is a setup book, and I appreciate that. It is just setting up their relationship and how they kind of develop a friendship. And of course, as they are meeting, and I'm going to get into spoilers now. Okay. So Jade, when she's out fighting with the task force, she wears a mask. All slayers wear masks because if you're known as a, assassin, basically, if your identity is revealed, you're going to be in trouble. So she is fighting with her mask, and of course runs into Considine and doesn't realize, that she's met him. He's actually her neighbor at her new apartment complex. And they don't know as they're interacting that like there's the person that she knows, Connor, as her neighbor. And then he doesn't realize like, okay, this girl is this vampire slayer because she's wearing a mask. So they've like met up a few times, had interactions of like her confronting him, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, are you new to town? And her job trying to like, make sure supernaturals are doing what they're supposed to. And then when they're meeting as neighbors, they like have very cute interactions of like, being friends, and him watching her at one point try and interact with her neighbors and ask them to go like hang out with her, and him just like dying of like how awkward she is. And it's so like mean but cute because, he's got like some sympathy for her, but also he just loves watching her fail. And I love their relationship. I think it's super cute. I can see this being like a very good romantic relationship in the next book. But it's definitely like a slow burn. Like I said, there is no romance in this first book, and I appreciate it. I just want, lay that foundation. So, like I said, this is probably to me, a 5-star read, but it is full of silliness, full of sappiness. Like it has so many tropes, so many ridiculous things. And I feel like I appreciate that. I'm a nerd and I love it. And there's things like her magical task force. There's like a wizard who keeps mixing up his poisons versus his potions, and he's their medic. And like, I just think that's great. And then there's a vampire on the task force that can't understand the new technology. So she keeps messing up her radio at pushing the wrong buttons and yelling really loud to like try and be heard over the radio. And it's just kind of the things that she incorporates that make you understand like the vampires versus the werewolves versus the shifters versus the wizards. And then now we've got the slayers, which are kind of being introduced in this book. So I love it. Loved all the characters. There was not any characters that I didn't like. And I really like that Considine is setting up more so there's the Hall of Blood and Mercy series. And that one is the first series that is part of this, Magic Forward. And that one is about Killian Drake. And so you don't realize then but you know, it's being established now. The killing is actually part of this huge family, and Considine is the one who's coming to, like, you know, make sure they're all doing what they're supposed to. Nobody's sleeping too long. No one's getting too cozy and settling down and just, you know, not interacting and not being part of the world. So I actually really like that it's establishing more background to characters we've already met. So I love it. With Kay and Shea, I will say humor doesn't always land, and also she has some quirks with her dialogue where there's reused words that I sometimes, as I say, I am a super nitpicking, but I do notice it. So for me, like I said, because this was like such a like funny book, I was laughing. My husband read it. He could hear me laughing. He'd be like, "Are you at this part?" And I just loved it. So 5 stars for me, but I'm going into this saying, like, I am so biased towards this book because I love the characters. I love Jade. I relate to her, and I love Considine because, like, he's terrible and I love it. And he's like kind of a jerk, but I think he's just like the sweetest, and I can't wait for him to fall in love because I know he's just going to be a mess. And I think he's going to be the one that falls first. That's my prediction. But I'm on the 2nd book now, so I'll let you know how it goes. I am going to be doing some nostalgic books in my next video and kind of going over books that got me into reading when I was young. You know, kind of just like what has laid the foundation for what I enjoy now and how that's changed. So let me know if you have any recent 5-star reads, and I will talk to you guys again soon.